Hello again. So I promised you guys that I would try to do more videos throughout the year of looking at life through everyday life through an economic lens. Since it is the week of Valentine's Day, hence the red, we are going to be talking about the cost of weddings and wedding rings in relationship to divorce rates. So I actually picked this topic, especially about weddings, because it's actually really fascinating the numbers uh, behind weddings. And so there was a study done back in 2014 that really contradicted a lot of the narrative that we hear being discussed and pushed in society. And so I thought this would be a perfect time to talk about this study. So let's get into it. So this study was back in 2014 was when it was published. Back then, the wedding industry was averaging about 50 billion dollars a year. It is currently at 72 billion dollars a year. Oh my gosh, that's so much money. That is adding quite a bit of value into the US economy. And you're not talking about just the monetary value that comes from weddings. You're talking about the increase in socioeconomic status as two people merge their lives and their incomes together. You're talking about the replacement rate within the US if they're having kids. You're talking about caregiving if either they live with their parents or their parents end up living with them sometime in the future. I mean, the the business of marriage, of business of weddings, it is a business, and it actually has a lot of implications in the U.S. economy and globally as well. If you're looking at like the replacement rate or the birth rate, that is a big concern in a lot of countries. China's got, concerns about that. Japan has had concerns about that for a while. Europe, their replacement rate's really low. The U.S. is starting to fall below as well. And so you have like places like the Nordic countries that have really robust maternity and paternity leave, trying to encourage people to have more kids because that adds people into the labor force for the future. So again, I mean, looking at this is a big deal to be married and starting a family. And so that's why I wanted to look at the business and the economics of weddings. So again, it's a big chunk of change that gets added to the U.S. GDP, and that 72 billion dollar figure, that was as of I think 2016. So naturally, it's going to continue to increase as people want to be different in the way that they do their weddings, and of course they want to top each other off, and it's very expensive. um, but there's actually some logic behind this, believe it or not. There's some psychological logic as to why we spend so much money on weddings and rings. So let's first talk about these costs. So this thing right here, the wedding ring, right? It on average in the US, this is according to the knot.com, um, the average cost of one of these bad boys is $5,900. Now that's nationwide average. If they break it down by regions, those numbers actually differ. Some regions are higher, some regions are lower, hence the average. There was one region that it went up to almost $8,000 to get a wedding ring. Holy cow. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. The cost of weddings on average, according to brides.com, is in the US, it's about 44,000 a pop. That's a new car. Holy cow. So it's big business in the US. And the total cost that I was telling you about, the 72 billion, that is not including the honeymoon, which adds another $4 to $8 billion. That's just for the cost of the wedding. And a lot of people are like, how do you spend that much money? Well, you start looking at like the cost of a wedding dress. I mean, if you've ever seen the show, Say Yes to the Dress, it's amazing how much people spend on wedding dresses. Looking at flowers, photographers, venues, catering, cakes, Cake Boss. Look at those types of cakes that they make. They're not cheap. And so it is big, big business. So this study the study that was done back in 2014. It was the first of its kind. It actually looked at the cost of wedding rings and weddings in relationship to divorce rates. So again, the narrative that's been pushed in society, and especially by the wedding industry, is the more money you spend on your wedding and or wedding ring, the more committed you are to one another. That is the narrative that's been pushed. And again, there is some psychological logic behind this, thought process behind this. So what I mean by that is what's called honest signaling. Okay. Honest signaling indicates that if you spend a lot of money or if something is expensive, it's an honest signal to other people. So an example of this would be the engagement ring. Okay, this thing right here. So the engagement ring ends up being an honest signal if and we're just going to go with the traditional man is proposing to the woman. I know it's the 21st century and women propose to men too, but statistically speaking, more men will propose to women. So we're just going to go with the statistics here. So a man is proposing to a woman and he buys a $1,500 or $5,900 ring. That is expensive. That is a huge investment. And what he's signaling to her is, hey, I'm committed to this. I am serious about this life with you. So I'm giving you this honest signal because it's so expensive. I'm giving you this honest signal of how committed I am. Because if it was cheap, if it was, a $12 silicone band, anybody can give that to anybody else, right? And so that's the logic behind like really expensive diamonds. And of course, De Beers has been infamously famous for and successful with their "A Diamond Is Forever" slogan. And so that's where the idea of really expensive diamond rings came from. On top of that, you also have expensive weddings. And again, it's an honest signal saying, hey, we're spending a lot of money on our wedding. It's a signal to society, to everybody around us that we are seriously committed to our relationship, right? And so that's what this study is looking at. And they're wanting to know, does this actually hold true? And come to find out, it does not hold true. It's an inverse correlation, meaning that there is not causation, but there is a relationship between the cost of a wedding ring or cost of wedding and the divorce rate. And it's not positively correlated, meaning that if one moves up, the other one moves up too. It's that they're negatively or inversely correlated, meaning if one moves up, the other one moves down. And so, and this actually varies depending on if you're a man or a woman. So let's look at that. Let's talk about this. So the first one is, we're going to take the wedding ring. Okay. So again, the logic would be if you're committed, you're going to spend a lot of money on your wedding ring, and your commitment level should be to the same level as how much you're spending for the ring. What they find among the men more so than the women. So they found this not to hold true, but if you spend more money on the ring, you are less committed in the marriage, which is crazy. And again, that held true, more true for men than it did for women. It's not that it didn't hold true for women at all. It's just that more men, it held true for them. On the flip side, for women, if you spent more money on the wedding itself, you were less committed in the relationship, in the marriage. And so your divorce rate was actually higher. Your divorce rate should be lower, right? It should be lower, but it was actually higher if you spent more money on the wedding. So these are very interesting numbers when you look at the analysis of this, because they looked at about 3,000 to 3,100 people within the US alone. They didn't look at any other nations. And they looked at, how much they spent on their wedding, and other variable factors, their age, their income, education level, all of this stuff. And then, of course, how long their marriage lasted. The A very surprising positive correlation that they did find was that if there was a higher level of people attending your wedding, there was a higher level of commitment in the marriage, which makes sense. Oh, and it wasn't just the high attendance of people, but it was also if the couple went on a honeymoon, then there was a higher level of commitment in the relationship. So if you don't spend a ton of money, but you have a high attendance and you go on a honeymoon, then you are less likely to get divorced. And the reason this makes sense is because then you're more focusing on the relationships. So relationships with your family, relationships with your friends, with your spouse, than you are on the actual event itself. So if you really break it down, it makes sense why these numbers are manifesting the way that they are. There is logic, and there is method to the madness. And so it's very interesting, because we're starting to see shifts of how people are viewing weddings and wedding rings and marriages themselves. So as you know, in the US, the divorce rate for a long time has been 50%. And in the past few years, that number has actually decreased. And a lot of people are like, oh, that means people are not getting divorced. Incorrect. That is incorrect. The reason that we are seeing those numbers go down is because people are just not getting married. A lot of people are just like, hey, we don't want the government in our business. We're in a committed relationship. We have kids together, or we live together already. We've been doing this for years. We don't need to get married. We're just gonna continue on our path as we have been. So it's not necessarily that divorce rates are dropping because people aren't getting divorced. They're dropping because people aren't getting married in the first place. Another trend shift that we're starting to see is against these things, these diamond rings, right? So De Beers last year showed their earnings down because people are not viewing the same perception of diamond rings as they have in the past. And I am a huge proponent for this change. I am not a fan. Anybody that knows me really well knows I am not a fan of mined diamonds. Okay, I think diamond rings are fine if they're lab created. Okay, everybody not everybody, but a lot of people like things shiny. I like shiny things, but I am not a proponent of mined diamonds. If you are a big environmentalist, you would understand why that would, why you wouldn't want to have mined diamonds, because it's horribly it's a horrible use of resources, of the earth's resources. And if you are against human exploitation, you would understand why you would be against mined diamonds, because although all these companies are trying to say, hey, we don't have, we have diamonds that are conflict free. If you look at where the majority of diamonds are mined, they are not in areas that are known for human rights activism. They are known for human rights violations. And so, you have places like Canada and Australia that mine diamonds, but the vast majority of them come actually out of Russia and out of out of the African continent. And those areas, again, are not Africa is definitely, the African continent is not conflict free. It's a very conflict ridden region, and Russia itself is known for human rights violations. So it's not like these are areas where they're known for being benevolent to one another. And so that's why I'm very much a proponent of lab created diamonds. It's cost efficient. It is, energy efficient. It's resource efficient. It's time efficient. In fact, diamonds have been lab created since the 1950s. They've been used for industrial purposes for a long time. And of course, the diamond industry has definitely, how should we say it politely? They've basically controlled the supply of making sure that the lab created diamonds did not flood the markets. And so, but what we're seeing is that there's a lot of ideas that are challenging the old perceptions of diamonds, that a diamond is forever, that slogan that's made De Beers, infamously famous and successful. But a lot of people are starting to challenge those ideas, which, again, I'm a big proponent of the lab created diamonds. And in fact, a lot of people are even going away from diamonds altogether. So you see a lot of people with those like silicone rings that you can get off of Amazon for like $12, and it comes with a whole package of different colors. A lot of people like that. I've seen girls that they'll change out the ring color based on their outfits. It gives a lot more options and flexibility. I think those are very efficient because you can work out with them. You can do anything with them, and they're not gonna pinch your finger because it's just silicone. And people don't have allergic reactions, at least not many, have allergic reactions to the silicone as they do with some other metals. And so you see these big shifts coming in the wedding industry, and I think there's some really good shifts coming. So I'm a big proponent of some of these changes. And of course, we can't end this video without talking about Valentine's Day itself, right? So let's look at some of the statistics of Valentine's Day. So in 2019, Valentine's Day produced $19.6 billion. Holy cow, that's a lot. So you're talking, gifts, flowers, going out to eat. So going out to eat alone, last year, I think, if I remember looking at the numbers correctly, it was 3.9 billion for going out to eat. Oh, that's a lot of people going out to eat all at once. Holy cow, all on the same day. And so, again, love is a big business for any economy. But again, to look at these numbers and apply economics to an everyday life, it's very fascinating to see this. At least I think it's absolutely fascinating. But I will post the link to the study and all of the different numbers I've pulled. All those sources will be in the comments section below. If you guys have any questions or comments, always go ahead and, as always, put them in the comments section below, and I'll try to respond to you guys as quickly as possible. Hit that subscribe button, and I will talk with you guys later.